The Browns QB room is turning into Oprah's Christmas episode. Everybody gets a job. Another quarterback has joined the fold. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day. In the land and on the road, the Browns signed Tyler Huntley to add a fifth active quarterback to the roster ahead of their preseason opener on Friday. I'll tell you what it means. Speaking of the quarterback competition, the Browns should have never presented it the way they did, and what the Browns' first unofficial depth chart tells us about where things stand at some key positions. First, though, I do want to thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And yes, the Browns did, in fact, add a fifth quarterback, active quarterback. Technically, they have 6 of them. 5 active quarterbacks, though, to the active roster in the form of Tyler Huntley. I'll start with just like the basics of this, which are Tyler Huntley has familiarity with Kevin Stefanski's offense to a degree. They ran as we know, they ran a much different style offense last year that was catered to Deshaun Watson's skill sets. And so it's not going to be exactly the same to what he ran last year, but he knows generally what they're trying to accomplish. He knows generally what this offense sort of is looking for. And he obviously is a culture fit, a guy who knows what the locker room dynamics are like and all those things, because he was here last year at this exact same time of year, training camp, preseason, etc. And so from that standpoint, like the familiarity part of it, it makes sense to add a guy if you're looking to add a guy who's been around and has seen some things and knows kind of what you're looking to accomplish. Now, I know what everyone's really concerned about, though, is like what this means for the quarterback competition as a whole, what this means for the depth chart as a whole. And I get it, okay? I understand where people saw this and they took it and ran with it to insinuate a lot of different things, whether it was, well, it's another blow to Shedeur Sanders, and they're mistreating him by adding another quarterback into this room. I also understand that the jokes write themselves. Franchise that hasn't been able to find a franchise quarterback all these years, now adding another quarterback to the mix here in this competition that's supposed to be between 4 guys anyway, and it's just like laugh out loud funny to a lot of people, especially outside of Cleveland. I get it. I understand. It is an easy sort of punchline thing for people to lean into when it comes to this Browns team. But I think there's actually pretty pragmatic reasoning for why the Browns did this. And my understanding from the information that I've gathered is that there is a pretty clear idea, and like it's pretty obvious why this was the case, and it doesn't have to be anything more than what I'm about to tell you. So adding Huntley revolves around sort of 2 main things. First and foremost, it's the preseason. You need bodies to take snaps in preseason games. You need guys to help you get through preseason matchups where you're not playing your starters the entire time. You don't necessarily want to play your backups the entire time. Maybe you want to play the backups for a longer period of time. And that's just the case in any preseason where you're trying to, make sure you get guys to the regular season healthy and ready to go. And so I'm thinking ahead already on Friday. You got a preseason game on Friday. It's the first one. Maybe Kevin Stefanski is planning on not playing Joe Flacco, who right now on the unofficial depth chart is listed as the QB1. Now, I think what's funny about that is that Kevin is already has an idea in his mind of how long he's going to play these guys. If they're making this decision before they hit the road to go to Carolina. So he's kind of going into these the joint practice with the Panthers and the preseason game, understanding it seems like where things are at in terms of his quarterbacks and how long starters are probably going to play on Friday. And so I do think that's kind of funny because he wouldn't tell us anything yesterday on that subject. But with that said, I do think that this is about that specifically in terms of hey, we need to have extra quarterbacks on this roster just in case, because Flacco might not play at all. He might only play like a series. We'll see how they handle that. But understanding that you then have, after maybe the first series, 3.5 quarters to still get through in a preseason game, and maybe even down the line in other preseason games, depending on how long they keep Tyler Huntley around or how much they want to play other quarterbacks throughout the preseason, you have to get through those games as well. So from that standpoint, that's reason number one why it makes some sense. And then off of that, we know that Kenny Pickett is dealing with this hamstring issue. We know that that's a thing that's happening. We also know that yesterday it was Kevin Stefanski shared that Dillon Gabriel is dealing with a lesser, it sounded like, hamstring issue as well. And so they both kind of have these lingering things that they're trying to be careful with and not get anybody more seriously hurt. Now, Pickett's is more serious than Gabriel's. Pickett missed 3 days of practice. Gabriel didn't miss practice yesterday. He just was limited and didn't take reps with and during team stuff. He just did 7-on-7s and individual stuff. So understandably so, though, they're trying to play it close to the vest and be sort of cautious here in terms of how much they play those guys or if they can even play at all. And those soft tissue injuries are no joke. They are not things to be trifled with. You don't want to mess with them. You don't want to put guys out there too soon. And so they are handling, in a way, Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel with kid gloves here. And when you think about it from that perspective, adding Tyler Huntley makes a lot of sense. There was another level to this when it first came down that was like, okay, maybe one of those guys had a setback. Maybe Kenny Pickett's injury is more serious than what they let on even at the beginning. And it's led now to this point where they really can't put him out there in a game. Maybe Gabriel's is more serious than they let on yesterday when Kevin Stefanski revealed he was going to be limited. That is not the case from what I understand. It's my understanding that this was simply like a precautionary thing. They know that those two guys are essentially banged up right now, and they don't want to risk further injury. So they're going to sort of put them in bubble wrap and likely not play them at all on Friday. And so they needed another quarterback to kind of get you through the meat of, or really even the back part of the game on Friday, assuming maybe Flacco, this is all an assumption right now. We don't have the exact details on how long the guys are going to play, but I'm sort of envisioning it being like first team goes for a little bit, maybe a series, paves the way for Shedeur Sanders to take over, but they don't want Shedeur Sanders playing 3.5 quarters in its entirety. So they needed another quarterback in that room to get you through that game, get you over the hump, and not risk injury to quarterbacks that they are legitimately trying to like develop or, give a legitimate shot to starting here. So that's the way that I envision this thing going. That is the reasoning behind it all. And so again, I get it. Like those injuries are the big thing here. That gives you that allows you to understand the perspective of where the Browns are coming from as they prepare for that preseason game on Friday as to why they would add another quarterback to this room. And like I said, I get it. Easy laughs. Of course, everyone's going to let the Browns be the butt of the joke as they don't have a quarterback figured out right now. They got 4 of them. They're having this open competition for the starting job, and now they added a 5th into the mix because, hell, why not? But I can assure you, as much as people are laughing at the Browns for like, of course, classic Browns, they don't know what they're doing. This is actually more of the opposite, where it's like, no, the Browns do know what they're doing. They're trying to be strategic and smart about these 2 injured quarterbacks that they have. They don't want to rush them back on the field. They want to give them time to heal up because, again, those soft tissue injuries, not something to mess with. You got to be careful and make sure those guys get fully back healthy. And so because of that, they are going to be patient, and they added a quarterback into the mix here for at least this week to just get them through a preseason game. That's actually a pretty common thing in the NFL. It's something that, other teams certainly sort of lean into as well when they're trying to get through the preseason, because at the end of the day, this time of year is mostly about getting guys to the regular season healthy on top of preparing for a season. So just keep that in mind as you crack your jokes, because I get it. It's easy to do that with the Browns, especially given how they've dealt with this situation over the years and all the quarterbacks that have washed out here. But I'm telling you right now, like, this was about just being strategic in the way that they handle these injuries and sort of forecasting ahead to Friday's preseason game and understanding, okay, we got to get through a preseason game here. We need the bodies to do that. And so Tyler Huntley makes some sense for us. Speaking of the quarterback competition, though, Kevin Stefanski should have never presented this thing as a totally fair and honest quarterback competition for the starting job, and I'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here. That means fantasy football is back and in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. My most competitive fantasy league is through Yahoo Fantasy. It's the most fun I have playing fantasy every single year. And so as my friends and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran, making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league as well. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, so I said it in the tease before the break here, and I will say it again. From the beginning of this entire quarterback experience, dating back to after the draft, when they took two quarterbacks in Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, when they showed up for OTAs in April and then in May and then minicamp in June, Kevin Stefanski and the Browns as a whole presented this quarterback situation as a competition and an opportunity for all four quarterbacks to compete to potentially win the job. But it is pretty obvious at this point that they actually went into this with a different idea of where each of these quarterbacks were and who would eventually and actually have a chance to win the starting job when it was all said and done. And this goes back to minicamp, by the way, because I even said way back then that it felt more like sort of two different competitions going on. You had one competition that was between Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco for the starting job. You had a second competition between Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel for the primary backup spot. And I think that's played out largely through camp here. Now, there's been a wrench thrown in things because of injuries. Kenny Pickett getting hurt is obviously not something that anybody on the Browns organization accounted for. They're trying to keep guys healthy. But once he did, yes, they ramped up the first team reps and the opportunities for Dillon Gabriel, who they clearly view is further ahead in his development. And also, let's just call a spade here. Part of the reason the Browns fell in love with Dillon Gabriel during the pre-draft process was because he is that guy. He's got the intangibles. He's got the quick clock. He can process things quickly. He can, get the ball out. I shouldn't even say that because Shedeur Sanders is actually really elite at getting the ball out quickly and reading a defense. But the processing part of it, the where he's at in terms of his development as a quarterback, because he's a little bit older, he's seen a little bit more than even Shedeur has. I think they loved that about him. They loved the fact that he has this smarts to his game, and they prioritize that in this competition as well, to the point where they felt like he was ready for more at this stage than even Shedeur is. Now, we can push back and say that that's not necessarily right. I've been saying that throughout all of camp, that I think Shedeur's earned first-team reps. And that's kind of the premise of this entire conversation I want to have here, because they might feel that way about Dillon Gabriel, and they might have felt that way about Dillon Gabriel from the beginning. But my thing is, they presented this as an open competition, that all four players were going to have a chance to win the starting job. And there's no possible way a week and a half into training camp, as the first preseason game here is coming down the pike in a matter of just a few days against the Carolina Panthers, there is no possible way that I can accept that was the truth or believe that was true about this competition when you haven't given one of the quarterbacks first team reps yet. No, like the guys that you're prioritizing with first team reps are the guys that you think are the most ready to play right now. And I think there's something to be said for them trying to be patient with a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, and not because this organization, and I know there's a lot of new people to this channel. I know there's a lot of new people to just the Browns in general following this journey because they're Shedeur Sanders fans. I'm glad you're along for the ride. I'm glad you're here. But I'm telling you right now, like it's not hard to go back and look up the history of this team screwing up quarterbacks. And so, I think there's something to be said for them trying to be patient with a guy like Shedeur and be like, hey, let's make sure let's get him up to a place where we feel like he's ready to go play and, iron out some kinks in his game before we put him out there on the field. Let's get him fully prepared for that. And they feel like that's what he needs. And I can accept that if that's how they feel. If it's like, okay, we want him to be ready before we put him out there, because this organization, as I was saying, they've screwed up so many quarterbacks by putting them out there too soon. And so there's something to be said for taking a patient approach with a young quarterback that they think has some things to work on. And that's so I can accept that. That's fine. And I think that is an important thing to keep in mind here is like patience can be valuable in the development of a quarterback, especially if you're worried about him failing or you think like the Browns are setting him up for failure. I actually think the opposite. I think they're setting him up for success because they're giving him time to learn, and then they're going to sort of let him grow into the role, and that's okay. But my bigger problem in all this is that if that's how they felt about Shedeur in the beginning, if they felt like he wasn't ready for that, they should have never presented this as, yeah, it's 4 quarterbacks all with a chance to win. And I get it. Like, you don't want to scare anybody away. You don't want to make it seem like nobody had a fair shot or whatever, because you don't want to hurt feelings, especially with these 2 new rookies coming in and trying to, get the best out of them or the most out of them. You sort of dangle this carrot in front of them of like, hey, you're going to have a chance to start. So let's see what you can do. And I also understand but I've said this, like they've treated this, I think I said this on yesterday's show, like a college quarterback race. Where in college these days, because coaches are constantly worried about guys transferring and leaving, they go into camp and they say, oh, it's an open competition and everyone's got a shot, because they don't want a guy to transfer. Because if you lose a guy, there's no free agency in college football to just like dip into and be like, we can replace that quarterback with this guy. No. The guys you have on your roster, the guys you have scholarships, they're valuable to you because that makes up your depth chart. And so understanding that, like, it makes sense that you do it at the college level. There's no scaring people away, though, in the NFL. Like, once you draft a guy, once you sign a guy, they're here. They're committed to you on some level. And so it's been interesting that they did present it that way, but it just wasn't necessarily the truth. Like, all these reps for Gabriel, especially with the first team, confirm what I believed all along, that they'll – and maybe this is the other part of it. To me, and I understand they didn't expect Kenny Pickett to get hurt, but it feels like they are preparing Dillon Gabriel to play sooner rather than later, or at some point this season. And so understanding that, like, maybe the one thing I sort of thought about this the last day or so was that maybe them giving Gabriel all those first team reps is, yes, they feel he's more advanced at this stage of his career, fine. But also it does kind of, I have to wonder if this plays into what I've talked about all along, which is they do think one of these veterans is going to get moved, or they're going to move on from one of the veterans and they'll keep the 2 rookies. And so they're like, hey, if Gabriel's our primary backup and we think he's that guy, let's throw a lot at him. Let's throw a lot of first team reps at him and see what he does with them and get a sense of where he's at. But he'll also be more prepared for the start of the regular season because we think he's going to be our primary backup. And the primary backup does have to be like ready to play in an instant, because you just never know. Anything can happen. Joe Flacco is 40 years old. Like, there's no guarantee he's going to make it a 17-game season, let alone the first 6 games of the season. So I understand where you're trying to prepare your backup potentially for that role. And maybe that's what's kind of happening here, is they were like, well, hey, Kenny Pickett's out. Let's give Dillon even more because we think he's going to be next in line behind Joe once we make this final decision. And so maybe that's a little bit of what's in play here. But like I said, man, like there were with Kenny Pickett's injury, there was an easy path towards divvying up those extra reps between, all right, Gabriel's going to get some first, and now Shedeur's going to get some first. Even on Monday, Gabriel didn't do team stuff. He only did 7-on-7s. That was a perfect opportunity to give Shedeur Sanders some first-team reps, and Joe Flacco took them all. So they have told us every step of the way where they feel these quarterbacks are in the pecking order of the depth chart. Ironically, it's the depth chart that they put out there unofficially for the preseason game. It's the same order we've been talking about: Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, Shedeur. But I just think it was, I don't want to say like silly or wrong or whatever. Like, it's football. It's not like wrong, but I just think they presented this quarterback competition incorrectly to everybody by making it seem like all four guys had a chance to compete for the starting job. And I think that as this has played out, it's been pretty obvious that they were not all on the same playing field or given the same chance to compete for the starting job. They had each of them in a certain sort of spot in their mind, and that's what's kind of played out during training camp based on how they've divvied up the reps. And I think that bears saying here on this show. I did mention the first unofficial depth chart, and yes, the quarterbacks are notable, how that order sort of panned out, but it also shows us a lot about other position battles on this team that have been unfolding during training camp. We'll talk about those coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Ever wish managing your money just felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. My wife and I have been trying to get some bigger projects done this summer around the house. Plus, we wanted to take a couple trips this summer, and we did that because we got a better view of our full financial picture. We found out where we could save some money so we could do the things that we wanted to do over the last couple months. Monarch Money has made managing our money together smoother than ever before. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, so the Browns did drop on Monday evening the first unofficial, by their own terms, depth chart leading into Friday's preseason game with the Carolina Panthers. And yes, I mentioned the quarterback thing, Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, Sanders. That's notable because it's what we've kind of assumed, but it's also just like gives you a sense of, yes, the pecking order of these guys, at least right now, even though it's quote unquote unofficial, but we love reading into these things. And so I'm going to do that at a number of positions because I think what was interesting too was, yes, beyond the quarterback position, there are other position battles playing out with this team, as we are well aware. And I think there were some noticeable things that we can sort of point to at certain position groups that I wanted to bring up. First and foremost, the wide receivers were interesting because you basically have the starters at this juncture based off this unofficial depth chart. Again, unofficial keyword. Were Jerry Jeudy, obviously, Cedric Tillman, obviously, and that slot spot that we continue to talk about and wonder like what they're going to do with it belongs to Jamari Thrash at the moment. And I thought that was interesting. Jamari has had a great camp. I have been blown away by what he's done this camp. I think he really worked on catching the football better. He has shown some really nice things, and so I think they are very high on him. He's an Andrew Berry draft pick, so of course he is. But I also think Deontay Johnson, since late, I think it was like day 4 of camp, like late in the first week of practice. Since then, he has just been on a tear. And I thought he had another really good day on Monday. I talked about that in my practice report piece that I wrote. So like Deontay's been great as well. And because of that, I thought that Deontay might just work his way into that slot spot for them as like, here's our top 3 guys. But he right now is listed as behind Jerry Jeudy. Now, it's all very arbitrary with receivers, especially with this Browns team right now, because they rotate these guys constantly. Like, yes, the ones are usually first up with the ones when they go, but then the next group of wide receivers that comes in is always different, even with the first team offense and all that sort of going on. And the running backs rotate a lot as well. But I thought that was interesting because Deontay Johnson has really come on strong lately, and to get a sense of like how they feel about him right now, I thought was interesting, and where he sort of stands. And plus, like, just the standout of Jamari Thrash being the number 3 guy, or the 3rd wide receiver listed as a starter, I thought was fascinating as well. DeAndre Carter, by the way, listed behind Jamari Thrash as the backup sort of slot guy. And then Luke Floria, who's really flashed, and Gaze Larvadain are both like the 3rd string guys at this juncture, but both, I think, have a legitimate shot to maybe make this roster. So we'll see what that all looks like when it's all said and done. I also, I want to go to the defensive side for a second, because I've talked a lot about the defensive end spot opposite of Myles Garrett. And I think it's been like, that has been one of the most highly contested jobs or roles on this team right now. And it's listen, starter versus being like a role player in that position is so it's really not that big of a deal because they rotate so much. And Jim Schwartz actually talked about that yesterday, rotating those guys and how they have so much depth there between Wright, McGuire, even Julian Aquara, and Joe Trianshul. Like they have a lot of guys who are doing some good things. And so it's good to have an embarrassment of riches there, if you will. And Jim Schwartz is happy about that. But Alex Wright was listed as the starter right now with Isaiah McGuire behind him. I think both those guys have looked really good during camp. Constantly, this defensive line's in the backfield, and you see those guys being part of the problem when it comes to like shutting down the offense or disrupting plays or just throwing things out of whack. So that's been really good to see from both those guys as well. But yeah, interesting to see how that one sort of stacked up. I also thought that the safety spot was interesting because we've all kind of understood Grant Delpit's the starter. Ronnie Hickman's that next guy at the free safety spot. And I think that's been true. I've seen a lot though of Christopher Edmonds, number 41, getting reps with the first team alongside Delpit and sometimes even Hickman when they've run these three safety sets. And you're going to get a lot of those three safety sets with the injury to Martin Emerson Jr. because they need guys down in the nickel and they're going to do different things. Yes, like Greg Newsome's going to bump outside, so you'll get some Cameron Mitchell in there. You might still even get some Greg Newsome at times in there. But the three safety thing is a real tool that the Browns and Jim Schwartz like to use. And so you will probably get some of that as well. And Edmonds has been running a lot with alongside Delpit, with Hickman sort of bumping down to the slot. So that's been an interesting one to sort of monitor. And then I was also just kind of looking at the running back spots because you have obviously no Quinshon Judkins, who is projected to be the main guy, but Ford does sort of stand out as the top guy on this depth chart right now. Dylan Sampson, the rookie behind him, Pierre Strong, and then Amani Marshall, and then the new guy they recently signed, Toa Taua. So just another group that I was kind of paying some attention to and just kind of seeing what it kind of looked like in general. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting, all things considered, as you got this first iteration of the Browns unofficial, again, they're calling it depth chart. Linebackers also sort of interesting because you get a sense of like where guys sort of stand with that group, who the starters might be. We know Carson Schlesinger. I've talked a ton about him just standing out of camp as the rookie that's really flashed the most. He's your starting middle linebacker right now. And rightfully so, wearing that green dot of practice with Devin Bush, and he's flanked by Devin Bush and Mahmoud Diabate. And then Jerome Baker kind of falls in line behind Diabate. You got Nathaniel Watson and Winston Reed in there as well for a group that I think will look better depth-wise when Jordan Hicks was still about to be playing for this team, and now obviously is dealing with the repercussions of that. But Carson Schlesinger being a starter, not a surprise. He's been brilliant, and he's really flashed so far at training camp. So yeah, just some interesting things. Again, it's unofficial. We want to make sure we put that in air quotes. So, you know, this isn't how it necessarily is all going to shake out by the time training camp's over. But when they release these things, it's always fun to read into where certain guys stand and what certain position groups look like and what some of these how some of these competitions are maybe shaking out from the team's perspective. And I think we got that a little bit with this first iteration of the unofficial depth chart. Another episode down with the Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. We got joint practices with the Panthers tomorrow. Not in attendance for these, but I'll be following along from a distance, and I'll have plenty to talk about based on what we sort of see. The rep share quarterbacks will be interesting, and that'll lead us nicely into Friday's preseason game. So you're going to want to hit that subscribe button and make sure Locked On Browns is your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Or as I always like to tell you, keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.